Hello everyone, this is TheNelston. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm here to talk very quickly about the plague effect in Rebirth of the Night. Do keep in mind that most of the information that I talk about today will stay relatively consistent throughout all the versions, so it doesn't matter whether you're playing 2.7 right now or 3.0, all this information should more or less apply to you. And if there's any version specific things, I will gladly point that out to you before I talk about them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into this short guide. Let's first talk about what the plague effect actually does. Now in 2.7, it is a 5-minute status effect that completely prevents you from healing at all. This includes from natural regeneration and from things like healing potions, which as you can see, don't do anything. Of course I have full health, but you get the point. Now, it is also lost on death, which means that if you kill yourself while you have plague, you won't have to deal with it anymore. In 3.0, this system is vastly different. Plague is now split up into 4 stages. In stage 1, your healing is slashed by 50%, but you will still regenerate. So if I take some damage here, you'll notice I take half a heart, and of course, regeneration is painfully slow, but it does still happen. Now, after about 4 minutes, Plague 1 will progress into Plague 2, and this is kind of like the Plague from 2.7, in that if you take any damage, you can no longer heal it back, whether that's from natural sources or from artificial sources. After 4 minutes of Plague 2, you will get to Plague 3, and you just saw I took some damage there because, yeah, Plague 3 is where things get nasty, and Plague 4 happens immediately right after, where you just take damage until you die. You might also notice that my maximum health is now 8, not 10, and this is the worst effect of the plague, because you will lose 2 entire hearts after you die with it. And the worst part about this is that it keeps going. So now that I have 8 hearts, if I die again, I have 6 hearts. If I die again like this, and then I'm down to 4 hearts, and if I die yet again, I'm then down to 2 hearts. And then, if I die one final time, I will be dropped to just half a heart. So anything could potentially kill me. If I slip off, oops, I'm dead. So you might be panicking a little bit right now. You're like, oh no, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna get the hearts back? All you have to do is craft a healing stone, which is made with angelic stone in an Ethereum capacitor or enchanter. I don't even know the name anymore. And it'll turn into some healing stone after you fire it up. And what this will do is it'll give you a little bit of regeneration, as well as boost all of your hearts back up to the original amount. So you might be wondering at this point, well, how do I even prevent myself from getting plague in the first place? Apart from wearing an N95 mask, there are a couple other different things that you can do. Keep in mind that the plague is game staged behind the beneath. In other words, if you don't go to the beneath, you will never unlock the plague. Now there are 2 main achievements that are going to happen which will make the plague worse and worse. The first one is simple. If you go into the beneath, you will unlock the plague. The other way to get plague is by mining up some mithril. Now this will advance you with the mystical power achievement, and this is when things really start getting nasty with plague. Once you unlock either the Beneath stage alone or the Beneath and Mithril game stages, you'll start seeing these plague mobs spawn in your world. Now there are a lot of different plague mobs, and I can't actually summon all of them because some of them are very unique, but the way to identify a plague mob is pretty simple. If it has either this like disgusting green like dotty sheen on it, and if you look at me, I also have these kind of flea particles jumping off, then that means that mob has plague. And if you're hit by it, it will transfer the plague to you. Of course, if you get plague, you can also pass on the plague to other players, to other mobs, by right-clicking or left-clicking them. So that may actually be quite useful. So there are several ways of also preventing yourself from getting plague once these mobs start spawning. The first one is pretty simple. If you shield while it attacks you, the blocked hits will actually not give you plague, so you will no longer get plague through shields. However, I want to mention that in 2.7, this is not a feature. If you get hit through a shield, you will still get plague in 2.7. The next thing is to use a ranged weapon to deal with plague mobs. They don't actually take more or less damage, they just take a normal amount of damage, but attacking it from far away ensures that you don't put yourself in any danger while you're shooting at it. And the next thing you can do is pretty simple. Light up the area around your base so that when you go home, you don't actually run into like 20 different plague mobs trying to kill you all at once. And this also ties into kind of like a semi-point that I want to make. Don't blindly charge into places without paying attention to your surroundings, because yeah, these guys can actually hit from very far, and this applies to all the plague mobs. Lastly, I think this one kind of goes without saying, but don't go to the Beneath and don't mine Mithril unless you're absolutely prepared to deal with the consequences. Finally, let's talk about how to actually get rid of the plague. So there are a couple different ways of doing this, and actually if you type plague into the JEI search menu, you'll see all of the options that you have. Now the first ones I want to talk about are these 4 what I call portable cures. So the first and most basic type of plague cure is known as the bundle of sweet smelling herbs. The way to craft this is pretty simple. You're going to need 8 of these sweet herb items, and this can be any of the flowers plus either garlic, spice leaf, cinnamon, or chamomile. And you're also going to need assorted vegetables, which can be crafted with 9 of any food vegetable items, so basically everything that this cycles through. Now this item has a 10% chance to remove the plague effect, so it is very inefficient, and on average you're going to need about 10 items in order to get rid of the plague. However, as you saw from the recipe, it is very cheap to make, so it may be worth it to grab a couple of these. The next cure type is the Old Treacle. Now this has a 25% chance to remove the plague effect. In order to craft it, you're going to need to either get a sweet syrup with a bottle of enchanting, or a sweet syrup with 2 molds plus a glass bottle. The way to get the sweet syrup is to brew nether reeds into glass bottles. You don't need to have water in them. This has a 25% chance to remove the plague effect, so on average you're going to need about 4 of these in order to get rid of the plague. To find nether reeds, all you have to do is look around the nether a little bit and you'll find these small kind of farms. Now keep in mind that this can be regrown on nether mycelium, but unfortunately there are 2 kind of big limiting factors here. The first one is that nether mycelium needs to be right next to lava. As such, in order to plant nether reeds on it, it's kind of like sugarcane almost. And the second issue is that nether mycelium doesn't actually spread to other blocks, and you can't create it any other way. So if you find a natural farm that's about this big, you can only recreate an artificial farm about this size as well, because you can't expand it further than that. Now nether reed plants can be turned into these block of nether reeds, but a block of nether reeds cannot be turned back into a nether reed, so I'm pressing R right now to try to find recipes, but they don't exist. Nether molds are the second item you're going to want to get if you want to efficiently farm treacles. Now you can either find molds at these small outcrops where these eggplants and red molds are growing next to each other, and the great thing about this is that the lava is actually extraneous, and that you don't need lava next to nether mycelium to grow red mold on. And it will just spread around kind of like mushrooms in any light level. You don't have to have a specific light level, it can be pretty much anything. So it is a very easy farm to kind of set up. Now there's another type of mold that you guys probably saw called gray mold, and this is a little bit harder to find in that it doesn't spawn in those farms, but rather in these kind of pots, and you'll find them located around the nether, either at these shrine locations or in large nether cities, which I couldn't actually find after a couple minutes of flying around, so hopefully you get a little bit more luck with that and you can find nether cities, because those are the most efficient way of gathering a lot of gray mold. The next type of cure are these plague leeches. Now these don't actually have a recipe, so if you press R on them, you'll get this little bit of flavor text in JEI that tells you a bit about the lore. But in order to get these, you're going to go around and kill these plague beasts. So they have a small chance of dropping, so as you can see I already got one there. And of course I have looting through on my sword, so I'm much more likely to get it. But yeah, they drop in pretty small quantities and usually kind of rarely. So you look at this, I killed about 5 plague beasts and I only got 2 worms out of it, or 2 leeches I should say. So yeah, you should definitely use these very sparingly, but of course they are very powerful as they have a 50% chance of removing the plague effect. And finally, we have the plague stew. This is the best item for curing plague on the go, and the recipe is really interesting. You're going to notice that there are a lot of old items that I taught you to make earlier that are going to be used now in the making of this plague stew. So to make it, you're going to need a bowl, a bundle of sweet smelling herbs, an old treacle, and a plague leech. Combining these 4 items together will give you a single plague stew, which has a 100% chance to remove the plague effect. So there are no chances with this, you basically eat it and you will get rid of the plague effect. I want to give an honorable mention to the purifying liquid because it is a really strong item, and I would actually say it's probably the best cure there is for plague. But the main issue is that it is kind of expensive to make, requiring 1 glass bottle, 1 golden apple, 1 diamond, and 1 plague essence, which itself is a pretty difficult drop to get. But the bright side on this is that because it works like a splash potion, you can actually get rid of plague on any of the mobs in your vicinity. So if you have any animals you accidentally give plague and you don't want them to die, you can throw some purifying liquid on them and they'll be cured. The last thing I want to talk about are these plague doctors. Now these guys spawn in these kind of like witch looking huts in villages, and once you go inside you'll usually find about 1 or 2 of them. And what these guys do is they will sell plague cures and also cure you if you have plague. So if I give myself plague, you see that he immediately gets kind of scared, runs towards me, and then throws that purifying liquid on me, which then immediately gets rid of the plague. This also works for other mobs that have plague, so if you have an animal that has plague, if you have, a pet that might have plague, you can bring them over to the plague doctors and they will deal with it very quickly. In 3.0, the trading system is currently broken, but in 2.7, you can actually buy plague cures, so it's like, 4 emeralds for a plague stew, 3 emeralds for a plague leech, and so on and so forth. And if you want your own plague doctor but couldn't be bothered to kidnap one from the village and bring it back to your base, just find yourself a nice villager, go up to him with a plague doctorate, which can be crafted like this in 3.0, but has a different recipe in 2.7, and just right click on him with it, and here you go. You now have a plague doctor. Alright, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comment section below. Leave a like if you liked the video, leave a dislike if you hated it, subscribe for more content like this, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye.